between Penn State, your previous stop, where you're at now, you've been in basically recruiting for 15 years in one way or another now, right? If my math is correct, that sounds about 15 years. How has it changed in the last 3 years, in your opinion? And what's the fallout going to be, if there is any, of the backlog of kind of what we've seen from some of these extra years? Obviously, what's going on at the very top level with NIL, and then even throw in the extra bucket of the transfer portal, where at the Division I level, obviously the one-time transfer is the biggest impact on it. But what the portal has done, which has been around longer than people realize, is the fact that now, as a Division II or a smaller school athlete, everyone in the country can see your name when you transfer. Whereas in the past, you'd have to start reaching back out and kind of start the recruiting process and identification process again. Is there a fallout? What's the biggest change been? Kind of, because the landscape just in the 3 years is probably massively different.
Yeah, I think post-COVID has been the biggest change in college recruiting, just not in baseball, but college recruiting in the longest time. Certainly the extra years of eligibility, right, that came as a result of the lost season in 2020 and the Division III level, 2020 and 2021. And I think that is something that isn't talked about enough, right? You had guys who were at the Division III level, now 22, 21, 22 years old, who had played extensively and still had 2 years of eligibility, right? And how attractive that was, for schools, right, to be able to recruit. But yeah, the one-time waiver, I think, is the biggest impact on college athletics for as long as, the NCAA has been around. That's not a new feature by any means, but the ability to go from, Division I to Division I and be, immediately eligible, for that upcoming season, is a huge incentive for college coaches, right? Ultimately, it's their job to win baseball games. And if they can, bring in, a plug and play where, that guy's more physically, more mentally prepared, right, to perform on day one, that's an asset to them. And, as a result of that, there's just less spots for high school players. If a high school class was, anywhere from, let's call it 8 to 12 players, in 2018, I would say most programs now are at least blending it, right, where you have, let's call it, 50% portal, 50% high school. So you're just seeing a reduction in the amount of spots. And I think particularly you're seeing it at certain positions, probably more effective than others. I still think, high school pitching is highly coveted, right? Those guys are definitely, going to have more opportunity just in terms of how many roster spots, right, are taken up by pitching. And then I think most programs still want to be able to take those young arms and develop them and, have them grow inside of their program, over a 3-4 year period. And then, athletes and guys who can play in the middle of the field. So catchers, shortstops, and center fielders, those guys are still, getting some good opportunity. I think, guys who are, let's call it high school bats, and particularly some guys who probably projected with some power might be the most affected, in my opinion, because, it's definitely probably the most difficult tool to evaluate, right, in terms of its progression from the high school ranks into the college game. And, I can now go and recruit, whether it's a Division I transfer or D2, D3 bat, that we have a large sample size, probably 300 plus college at bats. We're able to sit there in our office and watch Synergy or Aware and watch, how he handles, 90 plus, velocity in his at bats. There's just so much information on those guys that, going back to the evaluation process, right? What we're talking about, on our end here, CSA, right? College coaches are trying to mirror that. They're just way more information, able to get much bigger depth of knowledge on those guys. And then, when it comes to making the decision on them, you feel like you have a much better sense of what you're offering versus a high school guy where, there's so many variables to it.